Frenchie's Art Gallery, located on historic Oak Street beside the Maple Leaf Bar. With over 3,000 square feet of space, it features a large gallery front room and Frenchie's personal art studio. Frenchie's Art Gallery is also connected to the Maple Leaf Courtyard, which is ideal for the New Orleans night scene. Frenchie's Art Gallery, 8314 Oak Street. Yeah, you're right.
PlayingCollege.info has a mission to help young high school athletes get scholarships. Not just football, basketball, or baseball. Playing College aims to help with all high school athletics. Get exposure to coaches nationwide. Scholarships and financial assistance are offered in a variety of sports and non-traditional sporting activities. Track and field, soccer, golf, tennis, and so much more. Even fencing and cheerleading scholarships are available. At PlayingCollege.info, we make the contacts and let the coaches decide.
Well, here's the bottom line. Well, it's funny that you say that. Let me tell you. Good evening, and welcome to a very special Primetime Sports. This is going to be our Final Four edition. I got to tell you, I've been waiting for this show for weeks because I have three coaches right here in studio together that have all been in Final Fours. Dale Brown coached LSU in the 1981 and 1986 Final Four. John Brady in the 2006 Final Four for the Tigers, and Richard Williams in 1996 took the Mississippi State Bulldogs to the Final Four. We're going to talk to them all about their experiences, and we'll also talk to John Brady as well about what happened in the great games this weekend. It's down to four. You've got Oregon, North Carolina, Gonzaga, and the SEC's entry, South Carolina. That's all coming up next right here on Primetime Sports. Stay tuned. You don't want to miss this one. Welcome back to Primetime Sports. I told you this was a special show. And before I start, I got to thank Big Sam's Funky Nation. I always love to start big shows out with him. That was great. Hey, I told you we had some Final Four coaches, and we're going to start with the guy that got there before the other two. He started in 1972 at LSU. He ended his LSU career in 1997 with the second most wins in SEC history, and even today, he is third on that list all time behind Adolph Rupp and now Billy Donovan, who recently passed him. But his name's Dale Brown. He doesn't need any introduction. 1981, 1986 Final Four teams, and even some other great teams that were just as good or even better throughout the years as well. Here he is. Dale Brown, welcome to the show, my friend.
Scott, it's always good to see you, my buddy.
Great to see you again. We have some history. I remember you came up to Atlanta, and I was your host when you were the SEC legend back in 2004. We had some good times.
It's fun to be with you because you got a little enthusiasm, you got a little effervescence in your body.
I'm working a little bit less than normal today, but
Yeah.
I try to be energetic. This is my favorite time of year. Obviously, Sweet 16 and the Elite Eight just happened this past weekend. We have the Final Four. But I'm going to take back, because people that don't know LSU basketball history, they might not, if you're under 20, you might not remember when the gym was packed all the time. I remember from when I was in school in the mid-'80s up to law school when Shaq was there, you couldn't get a seat. And it was just a special time to be there. But it all started really way before that. I know you started in 72, but in the late 70s, I want to bring this up because Kentucky, who's been great for over the years, there was a 10 to 15-year stretch where at worst, you guys were even with Kentucky. And I would say for a few of those years, you guys had the edge on them.
When I first got the job at LSU, all my friends told me it was a major mistake. It's a football school. You can't win there big and et cetera. And, of course, obviously wanting to be a head college coach, I'd have gone to the moon at the time. So when I first got here, I went to the Sports Information, got an SEC guide to find out who's been the dominant force.
Right.
And my two assistants, Homer Drew and Jack Shallow.
Right.
Kentucky had won more national championships than the whole league combined, almost doubled. So the first meeting we had down in the basement of Broussard Hall, I wrote Kentucky, the king. LSU victories over Kentucky. On the road, 0, none. Average loss, 25 points a game.
Wow.
The number of wins, I think they beat them once or twice.
In history.
In history. I
Wow.
said, this is who we're going to, now I know the guy, who's this carpetbagger coming in here and say we're going to beat Kentucky. This is what we're shooting after. Well, it didn't happen initially, but it happened a couple years in, we beat them, and then we had a streak, we beat them 8 out of 11 times, and thank God for good players and kids that were coachable, we beat them 18 times.
It's a remarkable
And they
feat.
are the giant, and still are the giant.
And they are the giant. I mean,
Yeah,
they just lost a great game in North Carolina this past weekend. But, I mean, I'm talking like the stretch you had from 78. I remember 78, 79 team. That 79 team got to the Sweet 16 for the first time. They lose out to Magic Johnson. The 1980 team goes to the Elite Eight, and they end up losing to the eventual national champion Louisville Cardinals. Then you have a 26-game win streak. I'll never forget, 1981. That's where I want to go here. Your first Final Four. You're 17-0, and Kentucky beat you in the last game of the regular season, correct? But talk about that run from 78 to 80, and then to 81 to get into the Final Four, because that's when LSU basketball it picked up, and all of a sudden you were on the scene for good.
The 79 team was outstanding. I had to suspend my best player. I had 3 major rules. He broke one of them, didn't take him with him to the tournament. Of course, we lose to Magic Johnson. 81 was a great team. Great guys. Thank God for Art Tolis. Art Tolis, who was a great recruiter, was really the catalyst for finding Rudy Macklin, who was one of the greatest players in LSU history.
One of the
But
greatest.
that team, they won 26 straight games, the most in the country, 31 wins, the most in the country, had beaten Kentucky twice. Macklin got hurt in the regional championships in the Superdome, broke his finger, and went to the Final Four, and Indiana who went on to win it. In fact, we played teams in the NCAA, 5 of them went on to win.
5 and 9 years.
I say hold up 5.
5 and 9 years. That's almost
right.
incredible to me, because I mentioned 3 of them. Indiana with Isaiah Thomas,
You're
you see him right there.
You're right.
We just mentioned Louisville with the Darrell Griffith. We mentioned, obviously, Magic Johnson. But in 86, when you weren't expected, by the way, I have to bring this up because Xavier just beat a 3 and a 2 seed back-to-back in the NCAA tournament. That's hard to do because, you have to be like an 11 seed. Right. You did it. The only other team that's done that in NCAA history with the LSU Tigers, and they took it one step further in 1986 and beat the 1 seed, 3 seed Memphis State, 2 seed was Georgia Tech, and the 1 seed Kentucky. That was the most magical run for me because you weren't expected to be there.
That was a Cinderella story, and again, overachievers. And there was one great player on that team.
John Williams.
Was John Williams.
John Williams,
who's
number
being
24.
inducted into the Louisiana Basketball Hall of Fame.
Phenomenal guy, too.
Good guy.
Yeah.
No ego whatsoever, a lovable guy, didn't want to go out early and did because of pressures, but one of the finest players I've ever coached.
Dale, you have a knack, the way you are I can imagine you as a recruiter going into the kitchen or the front room talking to the parents. How do you close your deals? Because you had so many number one players. Everybody remembers Shaq, and if you're younger, you might remember Chris Jackson, who I think is the most electric player I've ever seen on the college level. But it was John Williams. I mean, Rudy Macklin. You got player Jerry Reynolds out of New York. Talk to me about how you got these great players to come to LSU. Randy Livingston.
The first time as a head coach, I was driving up in a rent-a-car to visit the family and the player. And I thought, now, what do most people say? I wanted to be genuine. I wanted to speak from my heart first instead of my head. And rang the doorbell, went in, sat down, and I said, Mr. and Mrs. Alexander, I realize everybody in the country wants your son. And I don't want to sound like a snake oil salesman,
Sure.
but there's one promise I can give you now. And I really did mean this from my heart. I'm really here recruiting a human being first and a basketball player second. And if you'll trust me, I said 25 years. 25 years from now, I'll still be communicating with your son. I think that's one promise that I never broke and I kept, and I think it was effective in recruiting. It wasn't some fake tool.
Now, this is one guy you didn't recruit, because Press Maravich recruited Collis Temple, but you coached him, and you are still very dear friends. He was just on the show a few weeks ago. We talked fondly about you and his memories playing for you, but he was the first African-American athlete, obviously, in LSU sports history. What was it like coaching him, and what was it like your friendship over the years?
He was probably, of all the people I've ever coached, had more zip in him, almost to the point that he was out of control sometimes. He was so hyper and wanted to do good. Went through, people don't know what he went through.
Oh, gosh.
With his own,
I've heard.
Own things on the team.
Right.
We're in Vanderbilt. Halftime, there's a knock on the door. The manager said, somebody wants to see you. Go out in the hall. There's a whole fleet of policemen there. The guy said, Coach Brown, we just got a call. We traced it. It came from a phone booth inside this arena. They said, if Brown and Temple come out the second half, both of them are going to be shot. And I said, well, I can't speak for Collis. I brought him out in the hall. This is the kind of character this guy was. That character he had in him, not a character. Came out and they said to me, nope. He said, I'm going to play. My family told me not to fear that. So he went through so much. You got to recognize LSU was the last place to really integrate. He was the first, and they couldn't have gotten a better one. Honor student. And he still holds the record, doesn't he? The only guy being drafted in NBA, ABA, NFL, and AFL?
All of it, yep. He's the only one. I know Dave Winfield did the major leagues as well, and he had some stuff. But you had so many great players. And I think back, and everybody remembers Shaq. And I'm going to go there because you just were in L.A., and they had the statue unveiling of Shaquille O'Neal. My primetime sports analyst happened to be in L.A. at the same time, John Brady, who you know well. And I heard the event was amazing. Everybody saw the documentary, Shaq and Dale. Talk about your relationship and talk about this event that he got that was so honoring him and so worthy of it.
I think John would probably tell you the same thing. The thing that was the most prominent to me were two things: highly organized, and two, the love and spirit that existed there. The way he recognized teammates and people that helped him along the way. It was a big-time event.
Yeah, I mean, listen, this guy started out in Orlando, as you know, but you've remained close. Talk about your friendship, because maybe the people that didn't see the documentary that was on the SEC Network a couple years ago, but explain to people how close you really are and the contact you keep with each other.
Well, it all started, and I won't repeat this story and bore people, but when he was 13 years old, by accident, I was speaking to the troops in Germany. He came up and wanted to get some exercises. After he got here, he was unsure of himself. I remember the first practice. Whenever he gets nervous, he'll stutter. First practice, I'm standing watching. He's tapping me on the shoulder. Coach, can I talk to you? Coach, he said, listen, I don't want to be involved in the offense. I'm not real good at that. I just want to block shots, rebound, and play defense. Well, I think we're going to have to do a little more than that. I think probably the thing I regret about coaching him, he was a very inferior free throw shooter. And one day after practice, I told him to stay. And I said, Shaq, I'm going to bring in Rick Barry and start working with you underhand free throws.
Oh, wow, okay.
So I said, because you're going to leave a lot of points left uncharted on your chart if you don't learn how to shoot free throws.
Sure.
So, Coach, come here. Coach, please don't do that. He said, I'm embarrassed. It'll be a granny shot. Everybody will tease me. So I said something that was unattainable. I said, okay, I'll tell you what we'll do. You shoot 75%. Now, we had 3 or 4 weeks before practice. You shoot 75%, and I'll have somebody charting you every day. A coach will be there charting you. 75% free throws. You can go ahead and continue them. He shot 79.5%.
Did he really?
Nice. Now, I have a theory. His hand is so big that when he shoots a ball, as we well know, you're getting that elbow up and snapping it. He's got another almost inch and a half to throw it.
It's like shooting a Super Bowl for most of us.
That's correct.
You know,
That's
it's
correct.
almost impossible.
That's correct. Now, he does not agree with me. He told me because surgery he had as a child, he couldn't get his wrist back properly because he was shot putting the ball. But he could have done better by drop kicking it than he did shooting one-handed.
The team, when I was in law school at LSU, I left to go to D.C. I came back, and I'll never forget, I was so just happy that the most exciting team I've ever seen. Chris Jackson, to me, I wasn't around for Pistol Pete in college. I saw every game he played in New Orleans as a pro, but I didn't see him in college, so I don't know. But this guy, Chris Jackson, Mahmoud Abdul-Rauf, to me was the most electric player. Talk about that team, pre-Shaq and post with Shaq, what he was like as a player and a
Chris Jackson was Steph Curry before Steph Curry
agree
was
completely.
Steph Curry.
I agree.
The group that we had together, when you initially look at them, if I was a fan or a sportscaster or interested in sports, I'd say, well, there they are.
That's them.
Stanley Roberts,
Shaquille.
Chris Jackson, Mahmoud, and Shaquille. You can say, how in the heck could you not win a national championship with those three guys? No excuses except that I could have done a much better job. But here's what the problem was. Chris was a sophomore.
Right.
He led the nation in scoring, the leading freshman scorer in the history of college basketball, 30.2 points a game.
Yep.
Stanley and Shaquille were freshmen. None of the three. Stanley was a nice, just the loveliest guy. Chris was humble and quiet. Shaquille wasn't sure himself. None of the three. There was not a Ricky Blanton on that team.
Right.
There was not an Ethan
didn't have
Martin
the
on
glue,
that
right,
team.
right.
And so a coach can't do it. And if I did do it, I didn't do a good enough job because we should have gone to the Final Four that year. However,
that Georgia Tech team was pretty darn good. Lethal
Three
Weapon
NBA
3.
players.
And you had a huge lead to start. And listen, I go over this with Bobby Crimmins all the time because I did a show with him, as you know. And I would laugh and I'd say, man, we beat Mark Price in '86 when you went to the Final Four.
Correct.
And, they had Tom Hammonds and all those great players. He goes, well, we beat Chris Jackson,
yeah,
Stanley,
yeah,
and I said, listen, that team was only together for 1 year, your team.
Correct.
His team had been there for 3 years and playing together. No excuses, but the fact is two electric teams, one of them had to win.
well, as anybody will tell you that coaches, you've got to have a leader. Not that they weren't good. Now, the coach can assume only so much. I'm talking about on-court leadership. I'll give you an example. Ethan Martin, who had no scholarships offered, McKinley High School,
Right.
was one of the greatest point guards in history of college basketball. Really, he
One of
was.
the best.
When you
One of
look
the
at
best.
his record in 4 years, now why? He was a leader. I remember one time him dribbling by the bench. We're playing Kentucky. He said, "Take so and so out of the game." I won't embarrass the kid. He said to take out. So on the Monday in the captain's meeting, I said, "How come you told me to take him out?" He was arguing with Rudy. Said, "You're shooting too much." So you need coach can't. Coach's not in the shower with him. Coach isn't in the dorm with him. Coach isn't on the floor with him. You got to have a leader.
I got to tell you what, you were one of the greatest leaders of all time, and I'm not done with you now. No, if you notice, for the first time,
I'm leaving.
For the first time ever, we don't have a football on the set because Dale said, "Hey, this is a basketball show today. We're doing basketballs, but I don't have one to sign. I got to get your signature." First of all, there's a lovely gift certificate for you.
Thank you.
Enjoy. It's a great
$5?
restaurant.
Is that all we did for?
It's $500.
We can't even go to McDonald's. $5.
Hey, we're big spenders over here. It's $50. But anyway, here, I want you to sign right here. You've got some names like John Brady. You may have heard of him. If you don't mind, just give me a big old Dale Brown. But we're not done with Dale. I'm going to come back, and he and John Brady, as well as Richard Williams, are going to come back later in the show. But coming up next, this is our Final Four Coaches Show. I told you we have three great ones. Next is Mississippi State, former head coach, 1996 Final Four coach. His name's Richard Williams, and he's coming up next on Primetime Sports. I mean, when you have Dale Brown, how do you follow it up? But I'm going to say this. This next coach's story is maybe even more amazing than Dale Brown coming from Minot, North Dakota to become the head coach at LSU. Richard Williams, former coach at Mississippi State for a dozen years from the mid-'80s to 1997. Well, he came from a circuitous route that I think would amaze most everybody. He was a high school coach, a junior high school coach, and the next thing you know, just a few years later, he is the head coach at a SEC basketball school named Mississippi State. I say a basketball school. They were a football school like LSU, but he put basketball on the map, and welcome to my show.
Thanks, Scott. Appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
I got to hear the story because I know Bob Boyd, obviously you and him were close over the years, but how did you get to Mississippi State, and where did you begin your coaching tree?
Well, actually, I went to school at Mississippi State.
Right.
I was an undergrad student there, got my degree there. I wanted to be a coach. I was not an athlete. I used to tell my player I was a substitute on a bad high school team. That was the extent of my playing career. I was actually a baseball guy. I was a baseball player, and I wanted to coach high school baseball. And so I got a degree in math because I knew if I had a math degree, someone would give me a coaching job. So I interviewed all over the South when I graduated State, offered a job everywhere I interviewed as a math teacher, but no one would offer me a coaching job. And so I interviewed in Natchez, Mississippi, And they said, yeah, you can be a coach. I taught 5 math classes a day, and I was the assistant fall cross-country coach.
Wow, okay.
So on the coaching tree, that's about as low as it can get.
What year would this have been?
That was 1967,
Okay.
fall of 1967. And so I had a roommate who was coaching junior high football and basketball, and he coached 7th, 8th, and 9th grade teams. And after the football season was over, he said, would you help me and take the 7th grade basketball team at Montebello Junior High School in Natchez, Mississippi? And I said, yeah, I'd like to do that. So I went to see the superintendent of education. He okayed it. And he said, we'll actually give you a $200 supplement for doing that. Now, that doesn't sound like a lot of money, but when I was making $5,000 a year, that $200 supplement sounded pretty good.
It sounds really good.
So I did that. I coached the 7th grade basketball team at Montebello Junior High School. We won the Miss Lou basketball championship, 7th grade basketball championship. I had no clue what I was doing. We just had a bunch of guys that played.
Right.
Never got the $200 supplement, by the way.
You didn't get it?
Never got it. The next year, I was teaching at the high school. The high school basketball coach asked me, would I be a part of his staff? Well, I thought, well, he recognized what I did winning that 7th grade championship.
Wow.
What I didn't understand was, back then we didn't have women's or girls basketball team, we just had JV and varsity boys. They needed an extra car to take the varsity and junior varsity team on the road, and I was single, had an extra car, so I kept a shot chart on the bench for the high school team. And that's how I got started in basketball.
All right, before you were the basketball coach, you said you were the cross-country coach.
Assistant
cross-country coach. Did you have any inkling that less than 3 decades later you would be coaching a team in the Final Four of the NCAA basketball tournament?
No, obviously no. You know, I coached, after that first 2 years, I went to Jackson and coached basketball at a junior high school in Jackson. And then I went back to Natchez as the assistant basketball coach and assistant baseball coach. And after 2 years, the guy I worked for there, a guy named A.C. Williams, became the head basketball coach at Delta State University.
Delta State,
yeah.
That's right, yes.
And they named me the head basketball coach. And at that time, South Natchez High School was one of the elite schools in the state of Mississippi. We played in the biggest league in the state, the Big 8 Conference, against all the big schools. And I thought that was it. I mean, this is it. This is utopia. This is heaven. This is all I ever want to do, be the basketball coach at South Natchez High School. And we ended up having some success there, and I got a junior college job coaching at Copiah Lincoln Junior College in Wesson, Mississippi. One red light.
One red light.
One red light. But it was a great experience. I was there 5 years, had some success there, and during that time, I started working Coach Boyd's basketball camps. John Brady was on Coach Boyd's staff, and John and I had known each other, and I don't know.
Well, I heard how y'all met, by the way.
The story, you know, and he was playing.
He was playing baseball,
yes.
right?
He was a baseball player at Macomb High School. I was coaching baseball at South Natchez, big rivals. So I knew John, and John was a very good basketball player at Macomb. So I knew who John was, and then John got me, when he went to state as an assistant, he called me one weekend and asked me if I'd come up and work Coach Boyd's camps. Okay. So actually, John Brady was responsible for my meeting Bob Boyd.
Do you remember your first words to John Brady?
I do, and I didn't know if I could say that on the air or not.
You can say it. Look, I heard it, and I think it's worthy because he was being John Brady. He gave you a little bit of the business when his team that he was playing on in baseball beat you guys, but you were a coach on the other team. He's 17, you're 26. And what did you tell him right after that?
Well, first of all, you have to understand now, we had a really good high school baseball team. We ended up winning the state championship that year.
Right.
But John was a pitcher for Macomb. They beat us the last game of the season. So then we had to have a playoff game. We beat them. We went on and won the state championship. John, as a left-handed pitcher, couldn't break a window pane with the baseball. He couldn't throw it hard enough to break a window pane, I promise you. But he threw a bunch of junk up there, and we didn't hit him very well. And every time he would strike one of our players out, he would turn and look at us in the dugout and throw his hands up and say, yeah. I mean,
you can't. Sandy Koufax.
You can't imagine John doing that, can you? No, I didn't think so. So anyway, the game is over. They win the game, and he runs over to me in the first base coaching box and starts saying the same stuff. And my first words to John were, John, kiss my ass.
Kiss where the sun don't shine, John Brady.
Right.
All right. That's
but we became great friends.
And I can tell. Hey, I got to talk about that 96 team. You coached for 12 years. I know everybody likes to bring them this 1 year, but this is Final Four week. So when you got into that tournament, you had 2 guys that ended up being first-round picks. Eric Dampier was the 10th pick of the draft. Dante Jones, who really became special during that tournament, and he was throughout his career at Mississippi State, 21st pick. But Marcus Bullard, I think Darrell Wilson was another guy. You had a very solid team. Talk about that run in the NCAA tournament when you eventually got to the Final Four.
Well, first of all, that group of players was not a highly recruited group of players. Darrell Wilson didn't have another scholarship offer. Marcus Bullard didn't have another scholarship offer. Now, obviously, Eric Dampier did because of his size, but he was not what would be considered a five-star recruit now by any stretch of the imagination. Dante was a big-time recruit out of junior college. We also had a guy named Russell Walters on that team who was just the screener and the rebounder and the defender.
Got to have that guy. You have to have that kind of guy.
So
right?
It was not a team that was highly recruited, but what it was, Scott, it was a team of very tough guys. They were physical, they played hard, they defended, and they liked each other. And so we started out the season, and we were winning games. We only lost one game in the non-conference, but we weren't playing great. We get into conference play, we won a couple, and then Kentucky comes into town, and we're both ranked top 10 in the country, and they beat us at our place like 18 or 20. And all of a sudden, everybody says the season's over. We couldn't beat Kentucky because we had beat Kentucky the year before at Rupp Arena for the first time in the history of our university.
Right.
So we made some changes, and Dante started buying into what we wanted him to do and how we wanted him to play. And we got on a run, and we were really good at the end of the season. So we ended up in New Orleans playing the conference tournament. And we ended up playing Kentucky in the finals of that conference tournament in the Superdome.
Yep.
And Kentucky had lost one game going into that against UMass early in the year.
That was an incredible Kentucky team.
Well, they had 9 players on that team that eventually played in the NBA.
Yep.
Well, we beat them on that Sunday afternoon in the Superdome to win the conference SEC championship, tournament championship.
Well, yes.
So we were playing great at that point in time. We go into the NCAA tournament as a 5 seed. We play VCU the first game, who's coached by one of my best friends in the business, Sonny Smith.
Sonny Smith.
And we struggled a little bit, didn't play great, but ended up winning the game. Then we got to play Princeton in the second game, who had just knocked out the defending champion UCLA.
UCLA, that's right.
Who had beat us the year before in the Sweet 16.
Right.
We were actually Sweet 16 the year before.
Yes, you were.
And got beat by the eventual national champion. So we got Princeton, and we were able to win that game because we just were better than Princeton. Bigger, stronger, faster, quicker. And then we go to Lexington, and we played Cincinnati and Connecticut. Played Connecticut, they were number 1 seed, had Ray Allen on the team.
Allen, yep.
Then we played Cincinnati, they were number 2 seed.
That's it.
So we were able to win both of those games, and our guys were playing great. Then we go to the Final Four, we play Syracuse, and as I've watched Syracuse play through the years since then,
right.
Our team was not put together to play against that zone of Syracuse.
Right.
To play against that zone, you need somebody who can flash into the high post and make a play. Both of my post guys were big, strong, physical, low post guys.
Right.
And so it was just not a very good matchup for us, and we had too many turnovers, weren't able to win the game, but it was a great experience for our guys to go to New York and play in the Final Four. And it's obviously the only time Mississippi State's ever been to the Final Four.
Well, it's a time that all Mississippi State fans will always cherish. I'm going to say this. We're not done with Richard because I'm going to bring back that guy whose left-hand pitch could not break a window pane. He and Daddy Dale Brown are going to come together, and I'm going to get out of the way and let these guys talk about their memories of going to the Final Four themselves amongst each other. And we'll come right back and have that on Primetime Sports. Stay tuned.
Rock and roll will never die. It's old New Orleans, my, oh my. Come on, baby, let's go rock and roll at the city lane. All night, let's roll, let's rock and roll. Baby, do the rock and roll. At Mid-City Lane's the home of rock and roll.
The owners of the Delachaise Wine Bar on St. Charles Avenue have opened up their newest creation uptown on Maple Street called Chez Delachaise, a new local wine bistro featuring a larger menu of small and large plates, a brighter atmosphere, and full table service. Additionally, patrons can enjoy a large patio out front as well as an extensive wine list offering selections from around the world. It's Chez Delachaise, 7708 Maple Street between Carrollton and Broadway.
Crescent City Steakhouse, a true neighborhood restaurant operated by the Vojkovic family since 1934, is the oldest steakhouse in the city of New Orleans. Serving only hand-cut, prime-aged, corn-fed beef for over 80 years, Crescent City Steakhouse has become a dining destination for both diehard locals and adventurous travelers who seek traditional, timeless New Orleans cuisine. Crescent City Steakhouse, 1001 North Broad, on the corner of St. Philip, in the heart of New Orleans.
Welcome back to Primetime Sports, March Madness Final Four edition. And I promised you I was going to have those three Final Four coaches together. Well, we're going to make you wait one more segment because right now we've got my Primetime Sports basketball analyst, former Final Four coach, because we're going to talk about what happened this past weekend and kind of preview the Final Four coming up next Monday. Well, Saturday obviously is the Final Four, and Monday night will be the NCAA championship game. So let's get right to it. John Brady, welcome back to the show.
Good to be here.
Good to see you. I can't wait for you and those coaches to get together. That's going to be fun coming up. We'll get to that in a second. No telling what's going to happen there. But we got to talk because I had UCLA winning this whole thing, right? I think you had Kansas. And we were apparently both wrong like most of America.
I had Arizona, actually. So
you had Arizona.
Either way, it doesn't matter.
So you were out even earlier in the Sweet 16 like me. But the bottom line is this. These teams, they are all deserving. But the one team that we have to talk about first, because I'd have to say, even though Gonzaga is a 1 seed, and I did have them in the final game, maybe they can get there. Mm-hmm. North Carolina with Kansas out would pretty much be the prohibitive favorite in most people's minds. Do you agree with that?
Absolutely. I agree with that because of the experience they have, the size they have, the great guard play. And here's the thing about Carolina that we have talked about before. They're equally as well on the offensive end as they are on the defensive end. And sometimes because they score a lot of points, people tend to think maybe they don't defend as well. But because they play fast and they play at an up-tempo sort of pace, sometimes they give up more points. But they're also very solid on the defensive end. And as I might add, all the other three teams are very solid defensively too.
You've been saying it.
Seems to me.
Rebounding and defense is what gets you there, and you're right. These teams, South Carolina might be the best defensively in the country. Who knows? You've said it all year about Oregon, and Gonzaga is the number 1 team in defensive efficiency in the nation. But Carolina is the most balanced team of them all. Listen, we all know about Joel Berry. We all know about the ACC Player of the Year, Justin Jackson, the 2 big guys who seem to have been there since the Eisenhower administration, Meeks and Hicks. But they get the guy with the game-winning shot. Luke May comes off the bench, who, by the way, had a career high in points and rebounds on Friday night in the Sweet 16 game. And he comes back, and oh, by the way, after Malik Monk ties this game up with 5 seconds left, he calmly comes down and hits the 2-pointer to win the game. This team is balanced.
Well, yeah, to parallel that, when we beat Duke in the regional finals.
Oh, y'all beat Duke?
In Atlanta, yes. We had a guy come off the bench named Darnell Lazar because Tyrus Thomas got in foul trouble the first half. He came in the first half, had 10 points. I think for any team to be successful down the stretch in an NCAA run, you have to have a player like that come off the bench, play well to give you something when maybe one of your starters aren't playing as well.
When you and Jordy and I did that show at Walk-Ons back 2 weeks ago leading into March Madness, we talked about the stat, and it still holds true, and I think it's worth bringing up. Roy Williams has only had 2 teams that have 4,000-point scores, and they both happen to be the years he won national championships in 05 with that team with Felton, McCants, and all them, and then 09 more recently with Tyler Hansbrough and that group. This team has 4,000-point scores. We've mentioned all of them, big guys, Kennedy Meeks, and obviously Isaiah Hicks, and Joel Berry and Justin Jackson. Do you believe in things like this, that this could be the 3rd time, and that 3rd time will be the charm once again?
Well, I think you have to look back on history and what it has proven, particularly in his case. I think one other thing he has going for him, not only good players that scored a lot of points, have the experience, he also has been there before as a coach against 3 other coaches who haven't been there before. So the preparation going into a Final Four, as we'll talk about hopefully with Coach Brown and Coach Williams, about preparing a team to go to the Final Four, the distractions that creates, I think Roy Williams has the advantage because he's been there many times before, 9 times, I think.
Well, that leads me to my next point because you in our last segment, you were going to have 3 coaches that obviously were in the Final Four. Richard Williams in 96, Dale Brown in 81 and 86, and you in 2006. Something about that 6th year. But y'all all had one time to go in that you've never been there before. And you went to the Final Four. There's 3 guys that have never been there before. What is it like for Mark Few, Dana Altman, and, of course, Frank Martin?
Well, the distractions, the obligation to the media, everybody wanting a piece of your time, wanting to talk to the best players, they want a piece of their time. You have to manage that along the way. The fans want to see you, all those things that go into that. And I think the focal point is preparing for that first game. You've got to be able to prioritize what you want from a media standpoint, what the players can actually give, and then you have to really coach your team and prepare them, because that's the most important thing, is that next game.
All right, I got to talk about the Oregon Ducks because, listen, all year, you kind of got me on board early. I watched the UCLA win back in December, I believe. Maybe it was early January, a crazy win. They were down 4 with like 6 seconds. Mm-hmm. They won it, and they have become since then a team when they're on TV I watch. During the tournament, they've evolved into the team I root for the most because I love the way they play with that heart. They're big three right now. Everybody counted them out when Boucher, the big man, went out, a great defensive player. And I was like, wait, they still have their 3 best players. I mean, Dylan Brooks, to me, is the most fun guy to watch. You see Jordan Bell right there, who had a monster game yesterday with 8 blocks, 4 assists, double digits in points and rebounds. But Tyler Dorsey is Mr. March. They're calling him that because he has 7 straight 20-point games, and he only had 4 all season. So these 3, to me, they took out Kansas, and I think this is the team, I have to say, even though there's an SEC team in it, I'm rooting for Oregon. I love the way they play basketball.
Well, the player you just mentioned, he's doing something special in the NCAA tournament, as we referenced earlier. You have to have a player sometimes in the NCAA tournament run to do something special, out of character. This young man's doing that. Plus, Dana Altman, I've known him since he was a junior college coach.
Yeah.
He's all about defending and rebounding. His team is tough. They compete. He gets it on the defensive end of the floor. Now he's got good enough players offensively to make plays for him, and that's why they're where they are right now.
Well, he got the Gatorade bath, and I could see he was flinching like it was going to be liquid, but I think he was relieved that it was just confetti.
Well,
he got up and,
that's a smart play. Somebody was anticipating some success
he
there.
was feeling his clothes like he was wet. You could see his face. He's like, wait up, it's dry.
Well, when you get to that point, you ought to go ahead and get wet. What the
you
heck?
Don't care, do you?
Yeah, whatever.
All right, the other side of it, Gonzaga was the probably least heralded #1 seed, even though that they were 35-1 or going in. Maybe they're 35-1 now. Regardless, this team is no Cinderella anymore. Obviously, they're a 1 seed, but they're playing like a team that can win the national title.
Well, 20-something years ago, I took a Samford University basketball team to the Gonzaga tournament. Mark Few was an assistant coach there, so I've known him a long time.
Under Dan Monson.
Under Don Monson, yeah.
Monson, right.
Perfect defensive guy, rebounding guy. They've always had a transfer or 2 come to their program, but I think with these couple of transfers that are really making an impact on their team, it just allowed them to be much more athletic.
3 that are playing regularly. There's 4 on team, but obviously the big one's Nigel Williams-Goss. He is the straw that stirs the drink on this team.
Well, these transfers that are playing for them has made them much more athletic, and not only on the offensive end, but particularly on the defensive end, it's made them much better defensively. I think that's one of the reasons that's why they're where they are now.
Jonathan Williams, #3, and also obviously the guy that hit the game-winning shot, Jordan Matthews, right there. Hey, real quick, South Carolina, Frank Martin. We got. Oh, by the way, one last thing. Shimmick Karnowski. He might be my 3rd favorite player in basketball right now. Paul Bunyan, the big fella right there.
How about a red shirt with an axe? He'd fit the part.
He
He'd
is
right
absolutely
there chopping
dynamite.
Them down.
Great passer as well. We got to get to South Carolina. Frank Martin, he is there. No one would have expected this at the beginning of the season, but they have earned every bit of it.
Well, the best thing that can happen sometimes is when you see unexpected things happen. This is a case where unexpected thing has happened to South Carolina. They're in the Final Four. Frank Martin comes from a high school beginning,
just like you guys.
Dale Brown and Richard Williams.
Yep.
So, and he appreciates everything that's happened to him. But I go back to this. I'm not a broken record, but I am stuck on this. He is a defending, rebounding guy. He's found some offense with some great guard play. He's got the MVP of the SEC playing extremely well. So I like his team and what they've been able to accomplish.
I like you, John Brady, because you bring it each and every week. That's Sindarius Thornwell he's talking about. And I got to say this, man. I can't wait for this weekend, because we got to get together and watch this. But I got to go right now because I got to give you, Dale Brown, and Richard Williams all the time in the world. They're coming up next. 3 Final Four coaches. You will not want to miss this. I'm stepping out, and they'll be right here on Primetime Sports. Welcome back to our very special Final Four Primetime Sports Edition. A long time ago, my mama taught me there are times to take charge, and then there are other times where you just got to get out of the way. And this is one time I'm going to get out of the way and let 3 Final Four coaches all get together without me cluttering up. It's going to be John Brady from the 2006 Final Four, Richard Williams from the 96 Final Four, and, of course, Dale Brown from the 81 and 86 Final Four. Right here. Take it away, John.
Thank you, Scott. Here I am here with Coach Dale Brown, Coach Richard Williams, and what I want to talk about is how we got to where we are a little bit, and then just share some things about how we coached and Final Four trips, since this is the Final Four week. First of all, Rich, I want to start with you about being high school coaches as we were. How do you get from being the high school coach or the junior high coach at Natchez, Mississippi, to be the head basketball coach at Mississippi State? Is it about relationships, or how does that happen?
You know, John, I think a lot of people think it happens because you go and you win a lot of high school games, and so you go get a college job, and I don't think that has anything to do with it at all.
That's true.
I think it's relationships. As you know, my relationship with you helped because you were working for Bob Boyd, who hired you when you were a high school coach, and then you and I had known each other for years, and you called me. I don't know if you remember. You called me. I was at my mom's house one weekend. I just finished working a camp, and you said I had a cancellation. Can you come up and work Coach Boyd's camp?
Yeah.
And so I drove up that Sunday afternoon from my mom's house, worked the camp, and that's how I met Coach Boyd. And then I worked the camps for, 3 or 4 years after that. And so the relationship I had with you, the relationship you had with Coach Boyd, led to me getting the job at Mississippi State. And he hired me, and I was there 2 years, and then he retired, and I got the job. So it's relationships, but also working hard, getting out, making yourself known, letting people see you, see the work ethic, and having some success. That doesn't hurt also, but this winning a lot of high school games doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get a college job.
You know, I agree, and I think there are a lot of coaches out there, Coach Brown, and you rode from where you grew up and how you grew up to being one of the most well-known coaches in the history of college basketball. You know, Richard and I don't have that sort of luxury you had. Everybody knows Dale Brown. Not everybody knows Richard Williams or John Brady. But a lot of times there are other guys out there that never had the opportunity to meet those kinds of people and have the relationships. There are great coaches there that could probably do what we did but never had the opportunity. So tell me about your from where you were to being a national figure as one of the most popular basketball coaches ever in the country.
I don't want either one of you to have a heart attack when I say this. I'm almost speechless because what he said, I could just say ditto to what Richard said. Now, both of you'd have a heart attack, so I'll talk a little bit.
It would be unusual if you didn't talk.
Yeah.
Come, we're trying to get it out of you here. Come on.
When he said relationships, let me tell you about relationships. I was a high school coach, going to games, watching college, finally got an assistant job. And through relationships, I wrote to 150 college coaches all over the country and said I'd come as a graduate assistant. I just want to be a college coach. And the reason I got sick and tired of teaching, you teach chemistry or driver. I don't even know how to light a Bunsen burner, and I'm teaching chemistry. Felt like an idiot doing it. So I stimulated, I wanted to be a coach. Only 2 people answered. John Bennington at Michigan State and Liddell Anderson at Utah State. So I'm really thrilled by that. Well, just by me writing those letters and having the opportunity to have met a guy by the name of Joe Dean, who we all 3 know well, when he was working with Converse Rubber Company, he gave my name to the athletic director at LSU and told him, you should look at this guy as an assistant at Utah State. So what Richard said is really, truly relationships. And I think any of us, I didn't even ask his salary. I just wanted to be my first salary. Let's compare our salaries as assistant. What was your first salary as an assistant?
Be honest with you, I was assistant coach for Bob Boyd at Mississippi State. Larry Eustace, who's was successful, still is a successful college basketball coach. Bob Boyd, the job at Mississippi State, paid $25,000 for one coach. But right. Bob Boyd made Larry Eustace and I split that paycheck. For 1 year, I worked for $12,500. The check was made out to me. We'd go to the bank and cash it, and I would divvy out Larry Eustace half of the money.
Really?
And that's how, that was my first year.
But the taxes all came out of John's part of the check.
Yeah. Well, at least I did get the retirement out of it, whatever that was.
And how about you?
Well, Coach, when I went to Mississippi State, I went as the part-time assistant. Mm-hmm. And so my salary was the amount of a college scholarship. what the players got. And so I was supposed to have another job on campus. I was a math teacher in high school and junior college. And Coach Boyd, when he hired me, he said, we'll get you a job teaching math to make up a full salary. I get to campus, no math job. So I worked mornings in the Office of College and School Relations, which is a recruiting office, a student recruiting office. Afternoons, I would go to the Coliseum and work with the basketball. So I was the part-time assistant when I was hired as the head coach. That would never happen in today's basketball.
Oh, I didn't know that.
I was never a full-time assistant at Mississippi State.
Our stories become, I'm sorry.
They are all equal. I need to get to this before, so we could go on for an hour and do this with you guys, because I love both of you guys and respect both of you tremendously. I need to ask you, Coach, start with this. 2 Final Fours at LSU, 81, 86, 2 different teams. In your first Final Four, and there are 3 brand new coaches going to the Final Four this year, if you can remember back to 81 in the preparation for your first Final Four team, was there anything that you knew or didn't know, or the second time was easier? Tell me about how you went through that first preparation in 81.
I tried to be prepared by calling people that had been to Final Fours. What do you expect about the tickets and the news media and all that business? But it really was a major distraction in 81. I mean, it was the first time LSU had been there in how many, 30-some years or whatever it was. And I could have done a little better job of maybe protecting the team a little better, because there were relatives and all kinds of people. Right. But I remember walking out on the court in Philadelphia, and I looked up at the seats, and I used to sit up there, and I thought, you know what, I hope, if I can be out on this court coaching a team in the Final Four, anybody in the country can. I had no connections whatsoever. And as far as jobs are concerned, I'm amazed how much alike our stories are. When I got the job at LSU, Mr. Maddox, we went back to his office. He was the AD, and he said, you accepted the job, but you didn't ask what your salary was. I said, I don't care what it is. He said, this is okay, and I'm the head coach. He said, give you $20,000, and I'll give you 2 assistants you can hire. He said, I'll give you can have $25,000. Jack Shallow got $13,000. Homer Drew got almost what you did, $12,000. So our stories are so similar.
Let me interrupt. When Dale Brown was hired as the head basketball coach at LSU, I was the assistant basketball coach at South Natchez High School. This is how bad the LSU basketball program was at that time. The first player they ever signed was Ralph Lowe. Ralph Lowe from South Natchez High School, big 6'10", didn't even start on our high school basketball team. And that's what Dale was having to sign in, and went from there to 2 Final Fours.
That's funny. I did not know that.
Absolutely.
He's a doctor. Isn't he a doctor now?
Yes.
His dad was a doctor, but he has a doctorate. I don't know.
I think so.
Teaching English, I think.
Yep.
Let me get you, Richard.
Wow.
96.
I like this. Let's go on.
We're going to go on. I don't care if it goes longer than he wants me to.
Let him do another show.
96.
Yep.
Mississippi State never been to a Final Four, didn't even ever dream they could go to a Final Four. I tell people all the time, as we talked about, Coach, he ruined it for every other coach in the SEC, because in 96, Mississippi State had no budget. He takes Mississippi State to the Final Four, so all the other ADs are sitting up there saying, if they can go, why can't you go, to their coach. So 96, anything special about that preparation, the things you went through, getting into that run y'all had?
Well, the biggest issue we had, and just like Dale just said, had I known, I would have protected my players more. Yeah. We win in Lexington, Kentucky. We come home. We won the regionals in Lexington. We just beat Connecticut, beat Cincinnati. We come back to Starkville, Mississippi, and you've been there a lot, John. You know what I'm talking about. Coach has been there a lot. It's not the media mecca capital of the world now. So we come in the next week, and all of a sudden national media are all over Starkville, Mississippi, and interviewing our players. And then it just so happens when we went to the Final Four, it was in New York City. And so we get off the bus in New York.
New York City.
Yeah, that's just where I want to be, New York. And so all of a sudden, it was the distractions, the tickets, the media, all of it. It's just too many distractions. And I tell people all the time, if you can ever take a team back the second time, you know more about preparing for that Final Four.
No question.
Last time, Roy Williams may have the advantage with
no
3
question.
guys who've never been, because he's been there several times. He's looking for his 3rd championship.
Yep.
I want to inject something about you. Your last time we played each other, why were we both at midcourt?
Because that was your last year.
And you gave us a gift.
And we gave you a gift. You had announced your retirement, and everybody was giving you a gift, and so we gave you a gift.
But you do remember what I did?
Yes, I remember exactly what you did.
That was no stunt.
I know.
When Starkville, Mississippi, how in the hell did this guy get a team at the Final Four? And I wanted
raised my hand and pointed to the Final Four.
Yeah, I wanted to know what the hell he did. I really respected that. That was incredible. Well, another thing I want to inject for somebody that may be watching this show, and if we go over, Scott Alexander, let us go over.
Yes.
Somebody should also learn about our relationship. That both of us, now I'm older than you, you're still a teeny, but both of us should have been far more mature in that. Your coldness to me made me cold to you. Yeah. I wasn't your enemy. I came to the press conference, but I was more mature. And I always say, anybody who says they don't have an ego, they're lying.
That's right.
That's for
Egotistically, I may have been, well, if you don't want to take it, I really enjoy our friendship.
Coach, it's been great.
You're a dear friend.
I've said this to everybody. One of the mistakes I made at LSU was not reaching out to you more and embracing that, and it was my own insecurities, and I'm glad you brought that up because we should have done this a long time ago. Because deep down, you and I have things that we're a lot of alike in a lot of ways. A little defensive, insecure at that age where we were, but this has been great for me, and it's been a privilege for me to get to know you and call you a friend now, a real friend. And Richard, you and I have had a relationship ever since I was 17 years old. Right. So I'm not going to get into that.
when we were at the unveiling, and you were sitting at the right, and Bo to the left, and Kobe Bryant and Shaquille, I thought of you and I thought, you know what? Here's two guys. I know the whole story. This was fisticuffs. To err is human, to forgive is divine. We both were stupid. We should have, and maybe there could have been an intermediary.
That's
somewhere.
right. It was a mistake, but it's good now, Coach. And I think it's good for LSU basketball. And you, like I do, we wish Will Wade all the best in the world, and we're going to be there to support him. Is that right?
That's correct. Right. I don't know him, though, do you?
I don't know him at all, but I hope we get a chance to meet him because I want him to do well. Richard, thanks for coming down here.
Thanks for having me, John.
I'm going to throw it back to Scott now with some more primetime sports. But this was a great segment, guys.
Thank
Appreciate
you, John.
it, Coach. Thank you so
Richard,
much.
John, always good to see you, my friend.
Coach.
Back to Scott.
Thank you, John. Wow, that was awesome. Dale Brown, Richard Williams, John Brady. I've got to thank these great Final Four coaches for coming on this show. I got to thank my producer, Will Hill. Hey, how about Ron Yeager and Jim Dotson, the guys that run WLAE? Hey, I can't do it without Jace Move, Kenny Juno, and everybody that works here at WLAE, obviously Naila and the rest of the group, and the Redhead Tsunami, and the good folks over at CST as well. I want to thank them all for a great Final Four show. Come back next week. We're going to recap the championship game next Tuesday right here on Primetime Sports.